The message arrived on a Tuesday morning. And it changed everything, Commander. Sarah stood in the operations center of Eden 7, watching her staff go about their daily routines. The agricultural colony stretched across 3 continents, its fields and forests, feeding dozens of human worlds. 40 million people called this planet home. Children went to school here, families gathered for meals, old men played chess in parks while birds sang and engineered trees. It was by any measure a peaceful place. The communication officer frowned at his screen. Commander, we're receiving a transmission from an unidentified fleet. They're using Concord at diplomatic channels. Sarah walked over to his station. The message was short and written in the cold, formal language of galactic bureaucracy. She read it 3 times before the words made sense. The Dominion had claimed this star system by order of the Galactic Concordat. All human presence was to be removed within 72 hours. Failure to comply would result in forced relocation. Give me Earth command, Sarah said quietly. Now the response came within the hour, but it brought no comfort. Earth had already received the news. The Concordat had ruled in favor of the based on some ancient precedent about resource rights. Humanity as an observer species had no standing to contest the decision. Their appeals had been dismissed without hearing. 72 hours, 3 days to move 40 million people across light years of space. It was impossible, and everyone knew it. Sarah opened a channel to the fleet. The face that appeared on her screen belonged to Fleet Commander, a tall being with silver skin and eyes like polished obsidian. They were beautiful, the way that glaciers were beautiful, cold and ancient and utterly without mercy. Commander said, his voice carried the tone of someone addressing a minor inconvenience. I trust you received our notification. I did. I'm requesting an extension. We need at least 6 months to relocate this many people safely. Thin lips curved into something that might have been a smile. Your request is the timeline stands. You're asking us to abandon 40 million civilians in 3 days. That's not relocation, that's a death sentence for anyone we can't move in time. Then I suggest you work quickly. Leaned forward slightly. Your species was given a great gift when the Concordat allowed you membership. You were shown patience despite your primitive nature, but patience has limits. This system belongs to the now. The Concordat has spoken. The transmission ended. Sarah stared at the blank screen for a long moment. Then she turned to her staff. Begin evacuation procedures. Priority goes to children, elderly, and medical cases. Everyone else forms orderly queues at the transport stations. They worked through the night and into the next day. Transport ships arrived from neighboring colonies, but there were never enough. The math was brutal and simple. They could move perhaps 2 million people in 72 hours if everything went perfectly. Everything did not go perfectly. On the 3rd day, with 38 million people still on the surface, the fleet descended from orbit. Their weapons were elegant things that turned matter into light. The first city vanished in a flash of white, so bright that people 300 km away went blind from looking at it. Sarah was coordinating evacuations in the northern hemisphere when the strikes began in the south. She watched on satellite feeds as city after city disappeared. Schools full of children, hospitals full of the sick and dying, Families who had trusted that the galaxy was civilized, that rules meant something, that being part of the Concordat offered protection. 12 million people died in the first 6 hours. They called it clearing operations. They spoke of it the way someone might speak of removing weeds from a garden, a necessary task, unpleasant but required. Their reports to the Concordat used words like efficient and thorough. Sarah managed to escape on one of the last transport ships. She stood at the observation window as Eden 7 grew smaller behind them, watching columns of smoke rise from what had been her home. A child beside her asked why the planet was on fire. Sarah had no answer. The news reached Earth 3 days later. The response was immediate and absolute. The United Planetary Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from every human world attended, either in person or by quantum link. The chamber was silent as the evidence was presented: satellite footage, communication logs, casualty reports, the faces of the dead scrolling past in an endless stream. When the presentation ended, the council chair stood. Her name was Director, and she had served humanity for 40 years. Her voice did not shake as she spoke, though tears ran freely down her face. We came to the stars, hopping to find friends, she said. We joined the Concordat, believing in law and justice. We accepted our place at the bottom of their hierarchy because we believed that patience and good faith would eventually earn us respect. She paused and looked around the chamber. We were wrong. The vote was called for the first time in human history. Every representative voted the same way. There was no debate, no dissent, no abstentions. Humanity declared war on the Dominion. But Director was not finished. She turned to the communication officer and nodded. A moment later, the declaration was transmitted across every frequency, to every species, to every world in the Galactic Concordat. To the members of the Concordat, she said, her voice now broadcast to a trillion beings across 10,000 light years. You allowed this. You enabled this. You ruled in favor of murderers and called it justice. So hear us now. She straightened her shoulders. Humanity has spent 200 years being patient, being peaceful, being what you wanted us to be, weak, harmless, beneath your notice. Her eyes hardened. That ends today. We are coming for the end. When we are finished with them, we will remember who stood with us and who stood aside. Choose carefully. The transmission ended across the galaxy. The declaration was received with reactions ranging from confusion to amusement. The ambassador laughed so hard he had to excuse himself from a diplomatic reception. Analysts in a dozen species prepared reports explaining why humanity posed no meaningful threat. Their fleet was small, their weapons were primitive, their territory was insignificant. The war would be over in weeks. Everyone agreed, perhaps days. They had no idea what they had awakened in the dark spaces between stars and shipyards, hidden inside asteroids and buried beneath frozen moons. Lights began to flicker on. Engines that had waited decades for this moment started to hum. Weapon systems older than humanity's official spacefaring history came online one by one. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake. They had believed what they saw. They had trusted their assumptions. They had looked at humanity and seen exactly what humanity wanted them to see. They were about to learn the truth. The galactic Concordat high chamber was the largest artificial structure ever built. It floated in the void between three star systems, a monument to cooperation among species. Its halls had witnessed 10,000 years of history, treaties signed, wars ended. The fate of civilizations decided by vote and debate. Today it witnessed something new. Laughter. Ambassador of the Dominion stood at the central podium, his silver face bright with amusement. Around him, representatives from hundreds of species joined in the mockery. Some chuckled politely behind diplomatic hands. Others laughed openly, their various sounds of amusement filling the vast chamber like strange music. They declared war, said. Still smiling, the humans actually declared war against us. More laughter rippled through the chamber. High Arbiter, the ancient being who had led the Concordat for 3 centuries, raised one of her 4 hands for silence. Her species, though, were known for their wisdom and patience. They had seen empires rise and fall. They did not laugh. This is an unusual situation, she said carefully. Perhaps we should discuss the appropriate response. What is there to discuss? Spread his arms wide. The humans are an observer species. They have been members of the Concordat for barely 2 centuries. Their fleet consists of perhaps 300 vessels, most of them converted cargo ships. Their weapons are kinetic systems and chemical propellants. They still use nuclear fission in some of their older stations. He shook his head with something like pity. We have 14,000 warships. Our weapons can crack planets. Our shields can withstand stellar events. This war will last perhaps a week, less if they surrender quickly. A representative from the Hollow Ones, a species offworked machine intelligences, spoke up. Our analysis agrees with the assessment. Human military capability is negligible. Their industrial base is insufficient for prolonged conflict. Their population is too small to sustain significant losses. Then we are agreed, said. This matter will resolve itself. The Concordat will not intervene. In a far corner of the chamber, almost invisible among the crowd of alien bodies, a single human stood. Her name was Doctor, and she had served as humanity's observer to the Concordat for 30 years. She had no voting rights. She could not address the chamber without permission. She was by design nothing more than a witness. She watched the laughter and the dismissals with a strange expression on her face. It might have been anger, it might have been grief, but somewhere beneath those feelings, something else flickered in her eyes. It looked almost like pity. As the session ended and representatives filed out, Ambassador approached her. He towered over her small human frame, his shadow falling across her like a shroud. Doctor, he said smoothly, I hope there are no hard feelings. This is simply how the galaxy works. The strong take what they will, the weak suffer what they must. Your species chose to be weak. Looked up at him. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she smiled, and there was no warmth in it at all. You have no idea, she said quietly, what you've awakened. Laughed again. And what exactly have we awakened? Your anger, your righteous fury. He leaned closer. Anger without power is just noise, Doctor, and your species has no power. Held his gaze. Tell me, Ambassador, in all your analysis of humanity, did you ever wonder why we accepted the lowest tier in your hierarchy? Why we never pushed back? Why we let ourselves be dismissed and overlooked for 200 years, because you had no choice, you were primitive. Weak, no. Smile widened slightly because we remembered our own history, we remembered what we did to each other. Before we reached the stars, the wars, the genocides, the weapons we built that could have ended our species 100 times over. She stepped closer to him, and something in her eyes made the massive take an involuntary step back. We chose to appear weak, ambassador. We chose to hide what we were because we knew that if the galaxy ever saw what humanity truly was, they would never let us live in peace. You're bluffing. Am I? Turned and began walking toward the exit. Over her shoulder she called back, you'll find out soon enough. I suggest you contact your fleet commanders, tell them to keep their eyes on the system. They might see something interesting in about 6 hours. Watched her go, then laughed again, but this time the sound was less certain. 6 hours later, the first reports arrived. The system was a staging ground, home to 300 warships and the support infrastructure for the planned occupation of human space. It was defended by the finest technology the Dominion possessed. Its shields could withstand anything known to exist. The attack came from nowhere. Ships emerged from imperfect formation, thousands of them appearing in the span of seconds. They bore no markings. Their designs matched nothing in any database. Their weapons fired before they could even raise shields. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it ended, not a single ship remained. The defense platforms were debris. The stations were tombs. 300 vessels gone in the time it took to eat breakfast. The single surviving officer pulled from an escape pod 2 days later could only repeat the same words over and over. They were everywhere. Their weapons went through our shields like they weren't there. We couldn't track them. We couldn't target them. We couldn't stop them. He stared into nothing, his silver face with shock. They weren't primitive at all. They were never primitive. It was all a lie. Everything we thought we knew was a lie. Across the Concordat, analysts scrambled to understand. Intelligence services pulled every file on humanity they could find. What they discovered turned confusion into terror. Humanity had achieved faster than light travel 300 years ago, not 200 as their records claimed. They had possessed fusion weapons while telling the Concordat they were still using fishing. Their agricultural colonies were self-sufficient fortress worlds capable of enduring siege for decades, and their actual fleet numbered not in hundreds but in tens of thousands. For 2 centuries, humanity had shown the galaxy exactly what the galaxy wanted to see. They had played the role of the primitive newcomer, the harmless observer, the species too weak to matter. They had hidden their true capabilities behind a mask of vulnerability. Now the mask was off. In the Concordat High Chamber, High Arbiter called in emergency session. This time no one laughed. Ambassador was notably absent, recalled to the Dominion to explain how he had so catastrophically misjudged the situation. We need to reconsider our position, said. Her voice, usually so calm, carried a tremor. The humans are not what we believed. An analyst presented the new projections based on the technology displayed at humanity's military capability exceeded that of the Dominion, possibly exceeded that of the entire Concordat combined. The chamber fell silent. In that silence, a single thought echoed in the minds of every representative present. They had allowed the massacre of 12 million humans because they believed humanity could not fight back. They had laughed at humanity's declaration of war. Now humanity was coming for the end. After that, who would they come for next? The question hung in the air, unanswered and terrifying. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, human fleets moved toward their targets. They did not hurry. They did not need to. They had waited 200 years for this moment. They could wait a little longer. Grand Admiral had commanded the first fleet for 40 years. In that time he had fought 17 campaigns across 6 different regions of the galaxy. He had broken rebellions, crushed pirates, and brought dozens of species into submission. His fleet was the pride of the Dominion, 800 warships crewed by the finest officers his people had ever produced. He had never known fear until today. The human fleet emerged from imperfect silence. One moment his sensors showed empty space, the next they showed thousands of contacts spreading across his tactical display like spilled blood. His officers began reporting numbers in voices that cracked with disbelief. 12,000 contacts, 14,000, 17,000, and still counting. Gripped the arms of his command chair, raised shields, all weapons to full power. Signal the Concordat. Tell them we need immediate reinforcement. Communications are jammed. Admiral, we can't reach anyone outside the system. Before could respond, the human fleet attacked. Their weapons were nothing like what the Concordat had. Instead of energy beams or plasma bolts, they fired solid projectiles accelerated to nearly the speed of light. The first wave of slugs struck the shields and punched through them like needles through cloth. The battleship Eternal Flame, pride of the fleet, took 6 hits in 3 seconds. The rounds passed through her shields, through her armor, and through her fusion reactors. She came apart in a bloom of light and debris all around him. Watched his fleet die. Ships that had taken decades to build were destroyed in moments. Officers who had served under him for years vanished. Flashes of fire. The tactical display became a mess of red warning lights and casualty reports that scrolled faster than anyone could read. Return fire. Roared. Target their capital ships. His weapons officers tried. They truly did. But the human ships moved in patterns that their targeting systems could not track. They appeared and disappeared in split-second jumps, never staying in one place long enough to lock onto. And whenever a ship did manage to fire, the humans seemed to know it was coming. They simply moved aside and let the shots pass harmlessly into empty space. 11 minutes after the battle began, the First Fleet ceased to exist, sat alone on the bridge of his ruined flagship. Emergency lights casting red shadows across the destruction around him. His crew was dead or dying. His engines were gone. His weapons were melted slag. Through the cracked viewport he could see human ships gliding past, their holes unmarked by battle. They weren't even damaged. 800 warships, and the humans had taken them apart without suffering a single loss. With shaking hands, activated the emergency beacon. He knew the humans would intercept it. He no longer cared. The galaxy needed to know what had happened here. This is Grand Admiral of the First Fleet, he said, his voice hollow. To any who receive this message, understand what I am telling you. The humans are not what we believed. They were never what we believed. He paused, watching a human dreadnought drift past his viewport. It was beautiful in its way, all clean Lines and deadly purpose, we thought. They were prey, he continued, primitive. Creatures who had wandered into the galaxy by accident. We dismissed them. We mocked them, we killed their children. And laughed about it. His voice broke. They were never prey, they were predators pretending to graze, and now they have stopped pretending. The beacon, transmitted for 3 hours before his power, finally failed. In that time every species in the Concordat received his message. They heard his final words, spoken as human ships surrounded his dying vessel. Tell the Concordat I am sorry not for fighting for underestimating them. Tell them to prepare. The humans are not interested in conquest. They are interested in something far worse. The transmission ended across the galaxy. Panic spread like wildfire. The Concordat had spent 10,000 years believing it understood power. Power came from technology, from numbers, from ancient civilizations with ancient knowledge. Humanity had none of these things. They were young, they were few. They were supposed to be weak, but strength, the galaxy was learning, came in many forms. Human fleets struck at 12 systems simultaneously. They did not target military installations first as any rational species would. Instead, they targeted manufacturing centers, resource depots, communication hubs, the infrastructure that kept a civilization alive. They did not destroy these targets, they occupied them. Within 2 weeks the Dominion was cut off from itself. Systems could not communicate, fleets could not coordinate. The mighty empire that had laughed at humanity's declaration of war found itself blind, deaf, and helpless. And then the humans began to advance on the conquered at high chamber. High arbiter called session after session. But no one knew what to do. Some species wanted to send aid to the others, argued that the Concordat should stay neutral. A few quietly and behind closed doors began to wonder if perhaps they should contact the humans and negotiate. No one wanted to think about what would happen if humanity won. No one wanted to consider that humanity might not stop. With the doctor still attended every session, she still stood in her corner, small and silent and utterly ignored. But now the other representatives watched her from the corners of their eyes. They wondered what she knew. They wondered what she had known all along. On the 17th day of the war, she finally spoke. The high chamber recognizes the human observer, said reluctantly, you may address the assembly. Walk to the central podium. She looked out at hundreds of faces, hundreds of species, all watching her with fear and confusion and anger. You're wondering why, she said simply. Why we hid, why we let you treat us like primitives, why we never showed you what we could do. She let the question hang in the air. The answer is simple. We knew what we were. We remembered our own history, the wars we fought among ourselves, the weapons we built that could have burned our whole world to ash. We came to the stars by our own violence. She looked at each representative in turn. When we found the Concordat, we could have revealed our true strength. We could have demanded respect, but we had learned something in all those centuries of bloodshed. Power without restraint is just destruction, and we were tired of destroying. Her voice hardened. So we chose to be weak. We chose to hide. We hoped that if we were patient enough, peaceful enough, the galaxy would eventually accept us as equals. We gave you 200 years to prove that you were better than we feared. She shook her head slowly. You killed 12 million of our people because you thought we couldn't stop you, and now you will learn what humanity does when patience fails. She stepped away from the podium. Our fleets will reach thee in 3 days. What happens after that is up to them, but I suggest the rest of you start thinking very carefully about the future, because this galaxy will never be the same again. She walked out of the chamber without looking back. Behind her, the representative sat in stunned silence. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Concordat had no idea what to do next. They could only wait and watch as humanity delivered its judgment on the species that had wronged them. 3 days, and then the galaxy would learn what humanity truly was. The sky above Prime turned black with ships. Supreme Chancellor stood on the balcony of the Grand Palace, watching the human fleet take position in orbit. He had ruled the Dominion for 60 years. He had seen wars and plagues and disasters of every kind. He had never seen anything like this. The human vessels filled the heavens from horizon to horizon. Their formation was so precise that it seemed artificial, each ship exactly where it should be, moving in perfect coordination with all the others. Military analysts had given up trying to count them, somewhere around 30,000. They had stopped bothering. Behind him, his advisors argued in increasingly desperate voices, "We must surrender immediately. There is no other option. Surrender, they will destroy us. Anyway, better to die fighting. Perhaps if we offered them the colonies, all the territory we claimed, they might accept." Turned away from the sky, his advisors fell silent instantly. "Contact them," he said. "Request terms." The communication channel opened within minutes. The human who appeared on the screen was a woman with hair and calm eyes. She wore a military uniform, decorated with more medals than could count. Her name, according to the intelligence files, was Admiral Wei. She had commanded the fleet that destroyed the First Fleet. She had planned the campaign that brought the Dominion to its knees in less than 3 weeks. "Chancellor," she said. Her voice was pleasant, almost friendly. "I've been expecting your call." Admiral forced himself to stand straight. He was a he. Would not gravel. "You have achieved orbital superiority over our victory is complete. I am prepared to discuss terms of surrender." "Surrender," repeated the word as if tasting it. "Yes, I suppose that's what you would expect. The Concordat way. The strong dictate, the weak submit. That's how it's always worked. It is how it has always worked," agreed carefully. "And humanity has proven itself strong. We accept this. We will submit to whatever terms you demand." Lean forward slightly. "Will you let me tell you what you're really offering?" "Chancellor, you're offering to accept punishment, to lose territory, to pay reparations. And in a few decades, when the memory of this war has faded, to start over, to rebuild, to grow strong again, and eventually to do exactly what you did to Eden 7, to some other species. Too weak to stop you, said nothing." She was not wrong. "Let me tell you what humanity could do instead," continued. "Right now, I have 32,000 ships in orbit. Each one carries enough firepower to level a continent. I could give the order, and in 6 hours Prime would be a dead world. In a week, every planet your species has ever touched would be ash and memory." Her eyes never left his. "I have calculated this very precisely, Chancellor. My staff spent months working out the logistics. We know exactly how many ships we would need, how long it would take, how many of your people would die in each phase of the operation. She paused. 14,300,000,000 and approximately 200,000. That's how many exist in this galaxy. I could erase every single one of them. And there is nothing the conquered could do to stop me. Felt his heart's racing. Behind him, his advisors had gone. Deathly silent, but you won't, he said. It was not a question. He could see something in her eyes that gave him hope, something that looked almost like pain. No, agreed, I won't. And do you know why? She stood up from her chair and walked closer to the camera. Her image filled the screen. 200 years ago, we came to the stars, hopping to find something better than ourselves. We had spent our entire history fighting and killing each other. Over land, over resources, over ideas, over nothing at all. We had built weapons that could end our species with the push of a button. We had looked into the abyss of our own extinction and somehow pulled back at the last moment. Her voice softened. When we found the Concordat, we had a choice. We could show you what we were, the predators, the destroyers, the species that had nearly wiped itself out 100 times before reaching the stars, or we could try to be something different. She shook her head. We chose to hide, to pretend, to be weak, to hope that if we were patient enough, the galaxy would accept us as we wanted to be, not as we had been. For 200 years, we kept our weapons in storage and our warships in hiding. We let you mock us. We let you dismiss us. We let you treat us like primitives because we thought it was the price of peace. Her expression hardened. And then you killed 12 million of our people because you thought we couldn't stop. You opened his mouth to speak but cut him off. I know it wasn't you personally. It was Ambassador. It was the conquered at ruling. It was a system that rewards the strong and punishes the weak. I understand all of that. She leaned closer. But here's the thing, Chancellor, those were our children on Eden 7, our families, our people who had done nothing wrong except exist in a system that some bureaucrat decided belonged to someone else. They trusted us to protect them, and we failed. Tears glistened in her eyes, but her voice remained steady. So yes, I could destroy your entire species. I could erase you from history and call it justice. Part of me wants to. Part of every human in this fleet wants to. She straightened. But if we did that, we would become exactly what we spent 200 years trying to escape. We would prove that humanity was nothing more than another predator species, just one with better weapons. And the 12 million people who died on Eden 7 would have died for nothing. She took a deep breath. So instead, here are humanity's terms. On screen, a document appeared. It was long and detailed, and as he read through it, his eyes widened. You will pay full reparations for Eden 7, not just money, resources, labor. People will help us rebuild what you destroyed. You will work alongside our colonists. You will see their faces. You will know their names. You will restructure your government to prevent this from happening again. No more observer species, no more lower tiers who can be sacrificed without consequence. Every species in the Concordat gets a voice, or the Concordat is done. And finally said, you will remember. Every child for the next 1,000 years will learn what happened on Eden 7. They will learn what their ancestors did. They will learn why humanity came to their world with enough firepower to end their civilization, and they will learn why we chose not to use She met his eyes, that is mercy. Chancellor, not weakness, mercy, the choice to spare those who wronged you. Not because you must, but because you want to be better than they were, stared. At the terms they were harsh, they would reshape his society for generations, but his people would live. His civilization would survive. Why? He asked finally, after everything we did, why would you spare us? Was quiet. For a long moment, when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because this is what separates us from every species that came before, not our weapons, not our ships, not our technology, our choice, the choice to stop the cycle of violence, to be what we wished our enemies had been. She straightened in her chair. You have 24 hours to accept or reject these terms. If you accept, the rebuilding begins tomorrow. If you reject, then we will do what we came here to do, and the galaxy will remember the only as a warning. The transmission ended, stood alone on his balcony, watching the human fleet hang motionless in the sky. 32,000 ships. Enough firepower to end everything his people had ever built, and they were offering mercy for the first time in his long life. Supreme Chancellor of the Dominion began to weep. 20 hours later, he accepted humanity's terms. 20 years had passed since the war ended. Professors stood at the front of her classroom, watching her students settle into their seats. They were young, these children born after the war. They had never known the old Dominion, the one that had looked down on lesser species and taken what it wanted without consequence. They had grown up in a different galaxy. Today, we continue our study of the human war, she said. Open your texts to Chapter 7. The students obeyed. Some looked bored, others looked curious. One young male in the back row looked uncomfortable, knew his family. His grandfather had served on the fleet that bombed Eden 7. The shame still lingered. Who can tell me what the humans could have done after achieving orbital superiority over our female student? Raised her hand. They could have destroyed us. They had enough ships. More than enough, agreed. Military historians estimate they could have eliminated our entire species in less than 2 weeks. Every world, every colony, every ship, complete extinction. The classroom was silent, and what did they do instead? Another student spoke up. They offered terms, reparations, restructuring. Memory repeated. That's why you're here today, learning this history. That was part of their terms. That every child would know what happened, not as propaganda, not as excuse, but as truth. She walked to the window and looked out. At the city beyond, it had been rebuilt. In the years since the war, and human workers side by side, the architecture was different now. Snort's hybrid too. Styles blending into something new. 20 years ago, we learned something about humanity, something that changed everything we thought we knew about power. She turned back to her students. We believed power meant taking what you wanted, crushing those who opposed you, ruling through fear. That's how the galaxy had always worked. The strong prey on the weak. The cycle continues forever. She shook her head. The humans showed us another way. They had the power to destroy us, absolute, total, unquestionable power. And they chose not to use it, not because they were weak, not because someone stopped them, because they decided that mercy was more important than revenge. The uncomfortable student in the back raised his hand. Professor, some people say the humans were foolish, that they should have destroyed us when they had the chance that we might threaten them again someday. Smiled sadly. Some people do say that. And perhaps they're right, perhaps. Someday, generations from now, some fool will forget what happened here and try to challenge humanity again. She paused, but I don't think so, do you? Know why? The student shook his head. Because the galaxy learned something during that war, not just about humanity's weapons or their fleets or their technology. We learned what they were capable of choosing. Every species in the Concordat saw a civilization with the power to commit genocide decide instead to offer mercy. That kind of choice stays with people. It changes them. She returned to the front of the classroom. The old Concordat is gone. Now, the hierarchy of species, the tiers that decided who mattered and who could be sacrificed, all of it swept away and replaced with something better, not because humanity forced us to change, because they showed us what was possible. The bell chimed. Students began gathering their things. Tomorrow, we'll discuss the Eden 7 Memorial and the cultural exchange programs that followed the war. Read chapters 8 and 9. The students filed out, but the uncomfortable young male lingered. He approached her desk with hesitation in his steps. Professor, can I ask you something? Of course. My grandfather served on the ships that bombed Eden 7. My family still carries that shame. Some of them say we should forget, move on, stop teaching our children about things that happened before they were born. He looked at her with confusion in his young eyes. But the humans don't want us to forget. They want us to remember forever. Why, if they really forgave us, why make us keep reliving it? Consider the question for a long moment. Come with me, she said finally. I want to show you something. They walked together through the city streets until they reached the Memorial District. It had been built on the site of the old military command, torn down after the war. Now it held monuments to memory and reconciliation. At the center stood two structures side by side. The first was the Monument of Shame. It listed the names of every officer who had participated in the bombing of Eden 7. It listed the dates and the places and the casualty numbers. It was carved from black stone and stood 30 m tall. The second was the Eden 7 Memorial. It listed the names of the 12 million who had died. The list was so long that it covered walls that stretched for Killam. Families visited every day to trace the names of their lost ones. Standing before the memorial was a human man. He was older, his hair, his face lined with years. He was talking to a group of children, explaining something with gentle patience. Led her student closer until they could hear. My parents were on Eden 7, the human was saying. My sister, my grandparents. I was off-world when the bombing happened. I was one of the lucky ones. A child asked, do you hate us? The human knelt down, so he was at eye level with the child. I did, he admitted. For a long time I wanted revenge. I wanted your people to suffer the way mine had suffered when our fleet surrounded you. I prayed that Admiral would give the order to fire. But she didn't. No, she didn't. And at first I was angry about that too. I thought mercy was weakness. I thought we were letting you escape justice. He smiled sadly. But then I came here. I worked alongside your people to rebuild Eden 7. I saw families teaching their children about what had happened. I saw young people like you coming to this Memorial to learn and to remember, and I understood something. He placed a gentle hand on the child's shoulder, destroying. You would have ended the pain, but it would have started a new cycle of hatred. Your children would have grown up wanting revenge on humanity, their children after them, forever and ever, until there was nothing left but ashes and anger. He stood up. Instead, we chose to let you live, to let you remember, to let you become something better than what you were, and you have. The galaxy has changed because of that choice, not because we forced you to change, because you saw another way and chose it for yourselves. The children listened in respectful silence. When the human finished, they thanked him and moved on to the next part of their tour. Students stood frozen, watching the human walk away. That's why they want us to remember, said quietly, not as punishment, as gift. They could have erased us. Instead, they gave us the chance to become worthy of survival. She put a hand on his shoulder. Your grandfather made a terrible choice, but you are not your grandfather. You get to decide what kind of person you will be. That's what humanity gave us, not just mercy. Possibility. The young stood at the memorial for a long time after his professor left. He read the names, millions of them, human names, people who had lived and laughed and loved and died because his people had thought them too weak to matter. He thought about his grandfather, about the shame his family carried, about the choice that lay before him. Finally, he reached out and touched one of the names, just a random name, someone he would never know. I'm sorry, he whispered, and thank you for showing us what we could be. Above him, the sky stretched endless and blue. Somewhere up there, human and ships flew side by side, partners now instead of enemies. The galaxy had changed, not through conquest, not through destruction, through the simple, powerful act of choosing to be better. That was humanity's true strength, not their weapons, not their fleets, their ability to choose mercy when vengeance would have been so much easier. And in that choice, they had shown the galaxy what it meant to be truly strong. The young walked away from the memorial with something new in his heart, not shame, not guilt, purpose. He would remember. They all would, and in remembering they would honor the gift humanity had given them, the gift of becoming worthy.